So we established the settings of the French Revolution. We talked about what was the Estates General and the different estates. The first estate, the second estate, and the third estate, the clergy, the aristocracy, and the commoners. Okay, so in May of 1789, the Estates General convened. However, King Louis XVI refused to rule on how the estates should vote. There was sort of, an argument on how these estates will vote and, how the votes will be counted. So the third estate lost patience. It invited members from the other two estates to join, from the aristocracy and from the clergy, and some did join the third estate. So in June of 1789, these members of the third estate, they form a national assembly, separate national assembly from the States General. The king again vacillates. He wonders whether to accept this new assembly or to send the troops to crush it. Now, he did send troops at the location where the assembly was held, but then he ordered the troops to back away. In the meantime, the sans-culottes, remember the urban poor, the workers of Paris, they worried that the king would crush this new national assembly, so they decided they need arms. They need to arm themselves to fight the king's troops. So on July 14, 1789, they stormed the Bastille. And that becomes eventually the French national holiday. They took over this prison and they freed the prisoners. They took some armor from there. And, this is how officially the revolution had begun. So small uprisings raged throughout France in the summer of 1789, and this is known as the Great Fear. Peasants burned land estates. They burned the records of these estates in order for them to cancel their debts. Noblemen would not know how much rent was owed to them. So this is sort of the revolution. The sans-culottes, the urban poor basically revolting in the city, and the peasants in the countryside. They basically are dismantling the feudal order. Soon the National Assembly abolished all aristocratic privileges. Basically, the feudal order was no more. It was abolished. And also, the assembly adopted a declaration. And this is the famous Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizens. This declaration was intended sort of as a prologue to the yet unwritten constitution. And it was supposed to justify the revolution in the eyes of the whole world. The declaration was influenced by the ideas of the Enlightenment. What was revolutionary about it is that it proclaimed that men are born free and that the aim of all political association is to maintain their rights. And those rights included personal freedom of thought and religion. They included equality before the law and also the sanctity of property rights. And the declaration also stated that it is the people, not the king, that are sovereign. And so this is sort of, the sovereignty is removed from the monarchy and it's now in the hands of the people. Now, this document doesn't really say anything about the rights of women. It says nothing about inequality, social inequality, inequality of wealth. It's like people are equal in front of the law. However, there is no need to make them sort of socially or economically equal. Now, it took few months for the king to accept the declaration, and there were rumors that the king would act against the revolution, so a Parisian crowd stormed into Versailles, where the king was living. Versailles is outside of Paris, and it forced the royal family into sort of a house arrest and moved them to the Tuileries Palace in Paris. Now this sort of cartoon, or two cartoons, illustrate really well this transition from one social order to another. Now, this didn't really happen in this early stage of the revolution. It was still a monarchy, and eventually there will be a constitution adopted. But it kind of nicely illustrates, the three orders. We have the peasant who carries on his back the nobility and the clergy, and then things were reversed, and then we have the nobility and the clergy carrying the peasants on their backs. So it's a nice cartoon that illustrates sort of the social change that happens as a result of the French Revolution. Finally, the National Assembly, which is now renamed Constitutional Assembly, adopts a new constitution in 1791. Now, this is sort of the moderate stage of the French Revolution. France still remains a monarchy, but now it is governed by a constitution. The king was no longer divine and absolute, but he is the first officer of the state. So absolutism is removed. There is a check on the power of the king by the people, represented by this constitution. There will be a legislature, which will be only one house, one chamber, and it will be elected every 2 years. And men with property were allowed to vote. The church was nationalized, and its lands were confiscated, basically to pay off the debt of the government. And the clergy would also become paid officials of the state. Feudal privilege was abolished, and all people were declared equal under the law. Now again, Louis XVI, he again vacillated. He wasn't really sure whether to accept this constitution. Things were going too far for him. So in June of 1791, he fled Paris in secret to Austria. He was hoping to go there and raise troops to crush the revolution. However, unfortunately for him, he was recognized. He was kind of disguised as a common man, but he was recognized at the border, and at the Austrian border, and he was captured, and then him and his wife, they become prisoners, or they were returned to France and they become prisoners. Now, European monarchs are beginning to freak out. The governments of Austria and Prussia urged all the monarchs of Europe to unite and to restore Louis XVI in France. And by April of 1792, Austria and Prussia invade France. There is a war between France and Austria and Prussia, eventually between France and other European countries. So this is we're beginning to see the acceleration, the radicalization of the French Revolution, and this is now, soon we'll see the end of this moderate stage and moving to a more radical stage, and that will be the topic of our next video.